Hello and welcome back to another episode of Advanced RC Adventures. This is a channel where we investigate, explore, build and explain, upgrade, and advance Nitro RCs to another level. Come start a new adventure with me. Today, we do have another adventure for you. We're taking a look at automatic tire truing. We're going to be looking at brand new tires and used tires. These are foams, critical to most touring adventures. These are 10th scale tires. We have 8th scale tires as well. You can kind of see the difference now. This one, of course, is used compared to a brand new tire. We're going to discuss a little bit about the foam types, the shore values, the widths of front tires and rear tires a little bit. We're going to be putting them on the tire truer or the tire lathe, talking about why it's important for brand new foam tires to go on your tire lathe and get trued up, and so much more. Let's talk about tires just a little bit first. I have 3 main tire types that I run. These are Race Matrix branded 10 scale foams. These particular ones are 26 millimeter fronts, a 35 shore shows front, and it's a carbon color. That's exactly what these foam tires are. The other 2 different brands I run a lot are contact foams and BSRs. Contact foams are, in a sense, not necessarily cheap, but they're less expensive compared to BSRs and Matrix. They're a good quality foam tire that you can run on all of your touring cars, but they're a little bit less expensive. What I've noticed though is that the wear rate of the contact foams, regardless of shore value, is a little bit less compared to BSRs and the Matrix. So just keep that in mind. Like all things, you kind of get what you pay for, and especially with foam tires. If you go a little bit less money with the contacts, they're perfectly fine. You can true them the same. They'll run very similar on the shore values, but they just wear out slightly quicker compared to the BSRs and to the Matrix. Other brands are this ULTI. These are the nuclear 10th scale versions. These are 35 shore as well. And then if you want to go back vintage, here's these Parma's PSEs. These are the 10th scale disc style foam tires that I ran carpet car 10th scale touring racing. And these particular ones were purple. They were 28 millimeters wide. But that just takes a look at a vintage, no longer made 10th scale touring car. For the Parmas, they rated them all in like colors, but they all had shore values. So for example, I don't know if you can see, but this cyan, this is a split value tire. It's a 35 shore and 55 shore split. And so the tire specific, they literally would have 2 different foams. One side of the tire would be one value, the other side of the tire would be the other value. Generally speaking, the higher, harder shore value would be towards the outside of the tire, and the softer shore value would be on the inside. And the reason for that, and a lot of people would run split style or compound style tire foams on fronts, is that if you're having too much grip on your front tire, you want that harder shore value to be here, so it would technically have less friction and it would slip slightly more. If you're being too aggressive in a turn, you can use a compound. The other ways we're going to talk about on some of the final steps of when we true the tire, we're going to finish or shape that front edge, especially on the front tires, to do a similar effect. But we'll get to that when we actually start turning the foams. Now this is a TOPCAD branded professional tire truing machine. It's an automatic tire truer. The controls, we have drive, we can have reverse and forward. Forward is rotating in a sense towards me, or if you're looking at the front side of the tire, it's rotating counterclockwise. Reverse is rotating clockwise if you're looking at the face. We have a feed speed, which controls the physical movement of the cutting arm. Feed control, you can automatically push it towards the right or push it towards the left. And then a feed on and off. If you press the button, then it's only semi-auto. You have to do what you want, and that comes into play when you need it. And then you push it on, and then when you push on this button, it'll automatically go and then automatically come back depending on how you set your limit switches down below. Some of the tools that you need for this particular tire truer is a 1.5 millimeter hex to adjust your limit switches, as well as take out your cutter. These particular cutters, this is an older style. This particular TOPCAD tire truer is, gosh, approximately 15 plus years old. Nowadays, the HUDYs and the CRCs, they use a carbide cutting system, which works very similar, but this is kind of like a hacksaw blade style, and these are replaceable. You can make your own as well. You're going to need just a simple Sharpie. The reason being is once you do your tire truing, you can mark inside of your rim to say if it's a rear or front and your shore value. You can also mark edges on your rim to take a look at for run out, and then you can sand or even take cutters to minimize the width of your rim at the same time, and so you can mark up the edge with the Sharpie, and then once you start cutting, you can see what's actually being cut off. We're going to need some dial calipers to take a look at the diameter and the widths of the tire. And then getting into some nitty-gritty, you need some type of 90-degree edge so that we can take a look at the actual profile of the face, 90 degrees from the front or rear face, looking at the top to actually see if you're flat across. And most of the times you would think that a brand new tire like this, it would be perfect. Well, it's not. I'm confident that the manufacturer set up the machines to attempt to make them true in 90 degrees, but generally speaking, in my many years of experience, they're not. And so it's important for brand new foams out of the box, out of the bag, to go onto your tire truer and make them flat and reshape. And then we need some way to do our final shaping. This is a stick, a painter stick. This particular one is actually a cabinet wedge. So there's a slight taper on the stick, but that doesn't really matter. You just need a flat piece of wood is what I like to use. You can buy from HUDY and from other CRC special made carbide sanding paddles and stuff like that. You can. But what I like to use and what many racers have used for years and years and years is what you see here. And these are sanding screens. They're made for drywall. They come in many different grits, 80, 100, 120, 180, 200, and so on. From 80 to very aggressive to 220 to more fine grit. This particular one is 180. This is what I use the most. And that's because it's kind of an in-between grit where it's not too aggressive and it leaves a lot of pill on the foam, and it's not too fine that it takes forever to do your final shaping. But somewhere around 100 to 180 is a good place to start on your grit level. You can have different style sticks. This is slightly finer. Notice it's just a stick. You use some spray adhesive. You wrap or place your sanding screen on top, wedge it and sandwich it in the best way to keep flat for a period of time until your glue cures, and then you can go ahead and use it. You can cut them off with a hacksaw or whatever you want to make certain sizes if you wish, and then depending on your initial stick width, it just depends on what you want on your final product and how you utilize your sanding stick, your shaping stick. And then some people like to use, this is a piece of Scotch-Brite cut at a certain width and size, so that you can do some final rubbing on the tire to get rid of any pill. I've found that this is not 100% needed. It's something that you can do as a final redundant step, but if there's any pill on your tire, the first time that you scrub in and run your foams on the street, it's going to take that pill away. So this is an optional step. It's still a good step, it's just a redundant step that is not always 100% needed, but we'll demonstrate how to use this Scotch-Brite pad. We have different size and style arbors. This particular one, since I run 10th scale most often, and there's some 8th scale that uses a 12mm hex. Goes in the back side of the tire. This is a 12mm standard hex for 10th scale touring. And it goes on there like that. You put on your spindle nut, tighten it up, and then you can turn it on. Before we do that, let's demonstrate what can happen over time to your face of your tire for your foam, and it becomes non-90 degrees. So hopefully we can see this the best we can on camera, but when we lower this, you can see the light, the gap from this right side moving towards your left side, and the gap is over here. Let's flip it around, do the same thing. We're down and we come lower. You can see that the left side is going to touch first, and the right side still has a gap. So what that means for this particular tire is that it's worn more, the diameter of the tire is less here, and what we want out of our tires is we want this to be flat, so that when we make our camber adjustment, that allows there to be more or less of the face of the tire attached to the ground. When we're truing our tires, what we're effectively doing is not just making this face flat, but we are making it concentric to the spindle, to the hub. That's why it's important to have a good arbor, an attachment piece that works well with your 12mm or whatever size hex you run, because from the factory, let's say this face is flat, but it may not be perfectly concentric. Concentric means that this circle here in the middle, let's say it's the center of the spindle, is perfectly centered to the outside diameter of the tire. What can happen is that depending on how these were created, you have your center of your spindle here, but the circle could be slightly offset. So when it's running, you're slightly elliptical, and it's not true to the center of the tire. Brand new tires can have the exact same issue. These I looked at beforehand. They're pretty good, but they're actually similar to those larger 8th scale. This you're probably not going to see on camera, but here's the 90 degree edge is touching here, and this piece is technically or slightly lower. So this edge of the foam tire is not on the same plane as here. It's actually exaggerated, ramped up. And so what the tire truer will do is we're going to face this, and we're going to get the entire plane, the entire face of the tire flat across. Then we'll go ahead and shape this outer edge of the tire only on the fronts, and then we're going to go ahead and shape and scrub the foam face to get pill off from the cutting itself. The cutter itself is a lot more aggressive than the sanding shapers, the sanding sticks. And so the goal is to do rough cuts, and you can adjust your feed and speed here and how aggressive you want to put the cutter into the face of the foam. And then you use sanding sticks to do that final fine shaping and smoothing of that foam tire face. The last thing I wanted to point out on your foams, especially on your used foams, if you've ran for a period of time, you know that the foam face is worn and you need to shape it back up, is you need to take a look at the rims and the foam itself. Hopefully the camera picks this up, but the white edge of the rim and the foam, it's not flush any longer. These foams are old, and they've actually condensed and they are now shrinking a little bit and they're pulling away from this edge. What can happen is that the adhesive as well that's supposed to hold the foam to the rim can degrade and it doesn't hold it. Sometimes you can save old foams and you can clean these up, sand them, put some rubbing alcohol, blowing them out, dry them, and re-glue them back down, and you can attempt to save, and then you can shave off that inner edge of the rim if you so choose. A lot of times they're not savable, but take a look. Here's that front edge. It's no longer adhered. So these particular tires are completely trash at this point. They're not really worth saving. Two reasons. Once I true them and we take diameter off of the tire, it's going to be a lot smaller, and so effectively they're not really useful for that 8th scale and 9th scale size car. But also we would have to do a lot of work to these rims and the foams to make sure that when you actually run them at 50, 60, 70 miles an hour in some cases, the foam itself is not going to explode off the rim. For 4-wheel drive cars, you want the diameter the same or very close the same, unless you have a specific reason to make the front and the rear different. But you want both fronts to be the same and you want both rears to be the same. That way the gear ratio between the front wheels and the rear, they spin at the same rate and you have proper traction, proper acceleration, and proper braking for the tires. And so because, like I mentioned, brand new foams can be a little inconsistent, it's important to put them on and make them all the same. So that's where your dial caliper comes in. You're going to measure different places of the tire, and notice this is 66.58 on edge. And then we bring in the other tire here. We're at 66.63. Now that's pretty close. But the tire truer, the tire lathe will get that face even better. So let's go ahead and put one of these matrix tires on the lathe and go through a demonstration on how to cut the tires. So the limit switch on here, how it's set up right now, will come all the way out to about here. We don't necessarily need to go out that far, so we can make an adjustment to the limit switch, but for this demonstration, I can just manually control how far the edge goes. So the setup here is you want to make sure you spin this out, and you want to make sure that your cutter is not going to contact your tire face here, and you're going to move. You're going to move the tire or the cutter somewhere in the middle of the face, and you're going to rotate, and you're pushing this cutter towards the face of the tire, and you want to get it close just by eye. And then you can move it away. This just gets us in a starting spot. The other thing to do with your dial caliper is you're going to measure all of your wheels, and you're going to find out what the smallest diameter is, and that's where you're going to set up your cutter so that that is your maximum amount cut off. For this demonstration, we're just going to kind of go through the steps and show you how these automatic tire truers work. So we're going to turn the feet on. This is spinning this way towards the cutter. And we're going to move this, in a sense, manually with the button over, and we're going to listen and make sure that we're making contact, and we can hear it audibly, making contact with the cutter to the face of the foam. So I made a small adjustment, moving it towards until I heard a very slight scraping of the cutter to the foam face. And then we can use our indicators here, and we can allow it to advance in millimeters closer to the face, and that effectively cuts it. The way this particular tire truer works is It goes one speed this way on the feed. This spins at a constant RPM. This runs a certain speed this way and a different speed this way to clean up the scrub face on here. So let's turn that on. Speed and feed control here. Let's go ahead and make this automatic. It hits the limit switch down below and it stops. We're going to advance this, and then we're going to cut across the face again. And you can continue to do that until you get the diameter that you want. So we'll advance it a little bit more and we'll do one more cut. Now for a brand new tire, you don't have to take a lot off. All you're trying to do is make that face flat, because it was slightly dissimilar from side to side. It was angled. Now again, for demonstration purposes, since this is now flat, we're going to come over here and we're going to use our sanding stick, and we're going to make the rotation of the tire spin the opposite direction so it's easier to use our sanding stick. If we had it rotating the same way and trying to do this, it's going to grab onto the sanding stick and be really aggressive. We're going to spin it the opposite way, so in effect it's sliding against the sanding stick in a lot smoother fashion and doesn't grip as much. We're going to rub it on the face to get rid of the pill, and we're also going to shape this front edge only on the front tires. And what we're doing is we're breaking that hard edge so it's slightly less aggressive when you go into turns. Now, depending on how much you take off and the shape at which you make this, and you want to be consistent left to right, will depend on how much bite you have going into a right or a left hand turn. I generally like to put a 45 and then soften the edges, and I'm only taking off a small amount. I've just done it by eye. This goes back to my 10 scale touring car days. Once you put your tires on, if you're noticing that for your location, your track condition, your road condition, if you're having too much bite or too little, then you know if you're having too much bite, you can take more edge off. You can make it a bigger takeoff face here and a sharp cutoff, or you can make it even, like a 45 degree. However way you want to do it, you can play and have fun with it. So now that the spindle's on, we're going to run the sanding stick flat across to get rid of that pill. We're going to hold that roughly at a 45 degree, and then we're going to start rotating to smooth out that edge. And then taking a look from top down, you can see how much blending you've done on that edge itself. If you like it, don't like it, then you can continue to make that change and that adjustment to how you see fit. Depending on your shore value, your front edges are gonna stick more or less. If you have a dual compound tire, again, it'll have more edge bite on your front tires or less. Tire truing is one of those things, for me anyway. This is a fun part of the hobby. There's, I think, in the entire hobby, you have things that you like and what you don't like as much. Creating shocks, rebuilding shocks, that's not as fun, in my opinion, as doing something like tire truing. Tire truers themselves can get kind of pricey. They can run anywhere between $400 to $1,000, especially in these automatic tire truers. And it's one of those things where you may not think it's an essential item, and it just kind of depends on what kind of level of tuning you want to do for your tires and for your car. In my opinion, is one of the best things that I invested in so that I can reduce variation in my tires, make them an exact width of what I want and what I need for the particular track setup or the grip that you have on your track. And it's become an essential piece of your entire suspension setup, is to have a tire truer. If you can get an automatic one, that's what I suggest. Save up a little bit more and invest in yourself to make it that much easier, and you're reducing variables that much more with using an automatic style tire truer. So let's turn this back on and take a look at our Scotch-Brite pad. We're going to do the same type of thing. We're rotating in opposite direction, and we're just lightly scrubbing off that fluff or that little bit of burr that comes off of the foam tire with the Scotch-Brite. And that's all you're doing to get rid of some of that pill. And there's nuance to the type and how much fluff or that bits of foam that are left on the tire. Generally speaking, when you have a smaller shore value, so the foam is softer, you're going to have a little bit more of that pill. When the shore value is a little bit harder, you're going to have a little bit less, because that foam is more dense and more compact, so you're going to have a little bit less pill. But you can tell that that cleans that up pretty nicely. Perfect for most road applications. Now, this is not intended to be an all-encompassing how to true your tires, to use the tire lathe. It's just a 101 kind of demonstration on what you can do, how you can do, and why the basics of importance are. Racers have a lot more tips and tricks in how they set up their tire lathe. Generally speaking, I'm a basher that races or raced for a long period of time, picked up a lot of information on how to and the whys, etc. A lot of people like to take off the large majority of the foam diameter, and that helps to keep the center of gravity in the chassis lower to the ground. That's generally for carpet racing, where it's a smooth surface on the carpet and you can get that center of gravity lower without having to scratch and scuff, and there's very little or to no bumps on that carpet surface compared to road racing. There's going to be a little bit of bumps, so your sidewall, the amount of diameter or tire foam that you leave on your tires, is going to be generally speaking a little bit bigger compared to carpet racing. All those things are factors, and they all go into how you address your, not just your tires, but your suspension. The tire and the suspension work together in order to affect or help the car act or react to certain loads in the corners and on to acceleration. So I'm glad you have taken this adventure with me. It's always fun to show different machines, tools, and devices that help us out in the touring car world. And these tire lathes or these tire truers are not just fun, but they're a practical and really important piece of that puzzle. So if you enjoy these kinds of videos addressing touring car elements, components, and tools, feel free to like, share, and subscribe. And if you like 10 scale, nitro, and especially touring cars, then this is a place to be. And thanks for taking the adventure with me.